Let me first say good evening. It's been a very interesting week for me. So I'm going to take a few moments and talk about this week and also about who I am and how I got to this city. I was born in Macon, Georgia in 1958. A very different city than Austin, Texas, by the way. Southern guy. In about 1974, I was sitting in my grandmother's house one night out in the middle of nowhere in a place called Kate, Georgia. I think it has about 130 people. And at the time, we had about 3 channels on local TV. And I was watching a thing called the Shark Theater, which is a very popular movie back then, different horror movies. And one night I was going over the 3 channels and I saw a thing that said Austin City Limits. I'm saying, what the hell is this? And of course I changed, but didn't know that almost 20 years later, I'd be in Austin, Texas. Now, a lot happened in between, for example, getting out of high school, going to the military and traveling, seeing the world, and getting here as a student at Houston Tulsa University in 1980. I came here to be essentially a business person. But I got drafted by the events around me dealing with things like civil rights and social justice, so couldn't really focus on business, although I've been an insurance agent for 30 years. Started with Allstate in 1984. But I kept getting drafted to address these issues that were more or less external issues. They were external challenges, which kind of contradicts what I do internally. And I kept saying, how am I going to deal with this? And it kept getting worse. Folks kept saying, Nelson, we need you to address these issues. I'm saying, I really don't want to. And finally, one day I came to my senses and said, you know what? This is obviously meant to be. But let me tell you about how this week fits into this night. I get a call last Sunday about a situation in a little place called Round Rock, Texas, where a young kid was fighting on the school campus, and it went south from there. He winds up being confronted by a police officer, throat, takedown. You all saw this stuff, and so I spent my whole weekend analyzing that situation and trying to figure out how we're going to address this, because these issues all over the country, and obviously a lot of folks don't feel comfortable dealing with those kinds of issues, which is part of my contradiction. I can talk about me all day in terms of what I do to relax, but the folks who see me have external issues that are real, and they have to be addressed. So I called a press conference, and I go to Round Rock High School on Tuesday at noon. I called it High Noon, the old Western movie. And I wasn't Gary Cooper, by the way, but so I get to the school, and everybody's like nervous because they see me all the time fight these issues, and oftentimes I'm angry and emotional. At least they think so. So when I get there, I walk in kind of gently and I said, well, you don't seem like the same guy I see on TV. You seem so different, so calm. Well, that's probably a reason for that. But I need your help. We're going to hold a press conference on your property. We're going to talk about you. Is that okay? They said, oh, of course, yes, Mr. Linder. In fact, you can go right over here at our driveway. We can bring you water for your clientele. I'm like, okay. It's a little unusual because folks are angry. And normally when the NAACP comes to town, folks get a little bit nervous about what we're addressing because it makes folks uncomfortable. So my team shows up, about 40 people. We call them concerned parents of Round Rock. The police show up, and they're making sure that we're okay. And they're bringing us bottles of cool water in 95-degree temperatures. Quite a contradiction in many ways. We're angry, we're upset, but yet these people, despite being under scrutiny, are very calm. Kind of threw me off a little bit. So I started the press conference, and I had to talk about that event, about what makes a person who's trained to be a peace officer do the exact opposite under enormous kinds of circumstances. And again, these things are happening all over the country. And what I learned is that the world is much bigger than we are. We see things oftentimes based on our own experiences, where we come from, how we react to things, and oftentimes we never really address what's really ticking people off. So what I've learned is now, as opposed to simply talking about the problems, I try to figure out who I'm dealing with. Who are these people? Why do they do those kind of things? How can I help them begin to see themselves in the mirror? And that's quite different than civil rights, by the way. When I come to town, folks say, well, you remind me of either Jesse Jackson or Al Sharpton. I said, look, I'm a country guy. I work for a living. I'm not that kind of guy. What I do want to do is help you see yourself so we can address these kinds of issues. So when I got an email about this event, it presented a challenge because my life is primarily built around other people. Very seldom do I ever talk to Nelson Linder because I'm too busy addressing other issues. And that's my challenge. I mean, every day is something different. I'm meditating and all of a sudden there's a phone call about somebody being hurt on a little small town, or perhaps even in Austin, Texas. So my dilemma is, how do I address me? And what I figured out was that when I began to look at myself, and I mentioned the incident in '74, seeing Austin, Texas on the TV, and what got me here, it was all meant to be. My challenge is, in a world where there's so much going on around us that we have to address, and it's so easy to ignore this stuff because many of us are so comfortable in our lives. But there are folks who have a daily challenge getting water, getting food, getting to school, getting employment, and too many people just ignore that. So how do we address that? So I go to Round Rock. There is a community, primarily African Americans, who are highly upset. Then there is, by the way, it's a very conservative place. You guys probably know that. Then there's the police over here. There's the teachers over here. And I'm saying, how are we going to deal with this? And here's my conclusion. And this is my challenge. I realize the impact of being calm mentally and knowing who you are helps your physical health. But my challenge is that I think too often in this world we live in, we get so comfortable, we don't see the things that surround us. And whether we like it or not, and we can actually deny it, at some point, the very things that we see that we don't want to address eventually addresses us. And so my challenge is, how do I, as a black man who came from a little town called Macon, Georgia, who has no idea how I really came to Austin, Texas, and why me? How do I get people to help address these issues that touches all of us in different ways? And if we don't at some point begin to address these issues and get outside of ourselves and find out what people really need, it's going to get a lot worse. So my talk tonight is very serious because what I see and sense through my instinct, which is natural, and through my intellect is a very different America. And so when I come to events like this, first of all, I'm so happy to be here because I'm very comfortable talking in different environments, and too often, a lot of us aren't. I get invites from black organizations, brown organizations all the time, but very seldom do I go to events where I'm the only black person in the room. And what I discovered is I'm very calm because I learned a long time ago what defines us is our spirit. So when I walk into a room, despite all my Southern training, I can sense by people's spirit who they really are. So when I sense you and see you, it's not your color, it's the spirit. And so where I'm going is, as I talk to folks in places like Round Rock and places like Ferguson, places like Cleveland, and these are very tough incidents where whole communities are divided and they live on edges, and places like Baltimore where I have two sisters. It's a whole different reality. So when I go into a room or a community where there's complete conflict, when one side is over here, one side is over here, and I notice when I get there, because of my experiences, I'm able to sort of bring people together and force them to think about what they're addressing. And the facts is that despite what happened in these cities and even in Austin, Texas, there's a bigger reality. So when there's a killing here that sends communities up in the uproar, we all have to address that whether we like it or not. Because whether we think we're involved, we are involved because we're in this community. So maybe at some point, we're going to have to look at who we are as a person and channel that energy all over this city, not just in certain zip codes, but in zip codes where you might not feel comfortable. And realize that in these communities where folks struggle every day just to live, they don't even think about relaxation because they can't. So they need our help in understanding, number one, how do you relax when the bills aren't paid? How do you relax when you're full of the criminal justice system? How do you relax when there are gunshots in your neighborhood, when there is no safety, when other folks drive by every day and look the other way? And that's a challenge for this whole country. So here's what I want to say. I want to challenge people tonight to meditate, of course, which is something you're probably very good at, right? but also to get outside of that and figure out ways to invite other people who struggle every day with resolving their pain and their challenges. And these challenges are real. Because I think when you find out who you are inside here, it helps you understand and even accommodate the physical challenges that divide this community and divide this country. And when I go into a situation, there's always cheerleaders on both sides. Either you join one or join the other, or you make people angry. Typically, I don't. Typically, I go right down the middle saying, wait a minute, I understand the reality over here. We're going to address this, but also understand the reality over here. My goal is to help folks achieve some kind of understanding so we can change these whole dynamics. Because if we don't, we can't keep going in a perennial circle. The consequences in this city and this nation are simply too great. So I want to say this is a great beginning. The fact that I received even an invitation to me was quite phenomenal. And of course, I accepted right away. So when you see the events around you that might not be in your neighborhood, that might be in this city, by the way, which has a very new government called 10-1, where folks now all of a sudden are struggling to do things a little bit differently. And this city is great, and as beautiful as it is, it has a serious issue with income inequality, with unemployment, with racism, with lack of opportunities in our communities. Those are challenges. And so in your insights and through your instincts and through your intuition, I need your help. How do we begin to meditate, but also invite other people who are different than we are, who don't have a clue about relaxation because they're so busy struggling every day to understand this crazy world that we live in? I am very fortunate. My dad was born in 1919. Okay, had a third-grade education, but he was a carpenter, and he built homes for a living. I once asked him, look, you got a third-grade education. How do you build a house? Because when you build a house, you're dealing with math, algebra, calculus, you name it. It's instinctive. He said, look, son, he said, an education, the way you describe it, is not really an education. You're being formally taught to do certain things. The real key is defining who are you? Who are you? Why are you here? What is your purpose? What is your strength? And I think what I say to you is beyond these conversations that we have about ourselves and about what we do, who are you in reality? Why are you here? And what are you going to do to change this world that's bigger than all of us? And I think as human beings, that's our primary challenge, is how do we take our circumstances that might be good or bad and change them and invite other people? And I maintain that if we invite other people into our lives and we go into their lives and help them address the issues that they can't stand to see because there's so much pain, we do so much for our children. And I'm going to tell you a short story, and I'm going to end on this story. I have a son who has spent 14 years in the United States Marines. He did 2 tours in the Al-Anbar provinces. And he survived, thank God. A lot of his friends didn't. And he got back to Austin in 2012, and one of his best friends was a kid named Bob Nix Jr. His father was head of the Austin Firefighter Union. And the Firefighter Union, NAACP, do not get along. We literally hated each other for years. In fact, they sued us in 2006. One day during the heat of negotiation, Bob Nix, the father, found out that my son and his sons were best friends, and that these kids had spent like 4 years in Iraq helping each other out and saving other lives. Now, here we are as a city, as politicians who can't stand each other because of ideology. Here are 2 kids from whole different worlds who yet are best friends who trust each other and somehow has figured this mess out. When the city of Austin found out that his son and my son were best friends, it changed the whole atmosphere, needless to say. They said, now, how the hell can this be? And there's a lesson there, that we are so much bigger than what we appear to be. And our kids have done a good job in many ways of saying, you know what, this is my friend in spite of his environment or his color. And I hope we begin to listen more to what the kids are doing, because they have a whole different perspective. And they seem to see things that we don't see, like the beauty in all of us, regardless of race or philosophy, ideology, or even income or neighborhoods. It's critical. So these two kids, by coming together, changed the whole atmosphere at City Hall. So when I see Bob Nick Sr. nowadays, we shake hands. We actually have a civil conversation because the kids are watching. And finally, my son said to me, Dad, I do not want to be a politician. Please don't try. I like what I do. I like where I live. I love you to death, but I want to be a human being. And I want to help other folks get there. Thank you very much.